When I began to make videos back in 2021 and post them here on this platform, YouTube, and also on BitChute, I did so from an earnest heartfelt mandate, a sense of mission. And oftentimes I was caught up in the purely intellectual realm, the purely information-driven realm of that service. And I'm offering this perspective in the spirit thereof. And when I began to make these videos and post them, I'm going to share this with you, dear viewer. I noticed a lot of people who were posting similar videos on the similar topics about ascension and 3D, third dimension, consciousness, 5D. Overwhelmingly and without exception, they presented this ascension process as this sort of magical, instantaneous, where the solar flash or some other type of event would take place and your reality would shift from 3D into 5D, and it would be this sort of magical, is the only sort of way, because they never really offered any other type of exposition on the mechanics of this transition. And overwhelmingly it was just this, you don't have the message that I was taking from these videos and these other type of information sources was that you don't necessarily have to do anything, that this was going to be an instantaneous event and that you were magically going to be transferred from this one type of reality to another higher reality. Well, and I was sort of just taking a lot of things in. This was pretty much right after my Kundalini God Force awakening in September 24th of 2021. And after things had settled down and I began to kind of orient myself, I felt a very strong sense of mission. And so as I was taking in information from all avenues, all sources, I began to, sort of parse and sort of evaluate and discern and use discernment. And I began to refer to my inner discernment and find that I wasn't quite comfortable with these explanations and whatnot. And fortunately for myself, I had a context of, going back from my early days, even in high school. I owned a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, and there I was, a 15-year-old kid, playing football and listening to heavy metal music, but trying to understand what the Bhagavad Gita was all about. And then as I got into college, I had fortunately a professor that was into Kriya Yoga, and his guru was Paramahansa Yogananda, and thus by default that became my guru in my college days. Paramahansa Yogananda, Namaste, Namaskaram. In that lineage of Kriya Yoga, but directly responsible for, I believe, for the energy release of the God Force within me was Sadhguru, who is also a practitioner and a promulgator of Kriya Yoga. But it was his mantras that I had listened to and worked with for 11 hours, 11 minutes, and 11 seconds that led directly, along with the sunlight that day, to the release of that God Force energy. But what happens is when you go through an experience like this, your crown chakra opens, and then you're connected to the galactic chakra, to God, to Source, and then you become a receiver, as Nikola Tesla talked about. You become a receiver for this information. There's nothing that there's nothing special about my ego except that it is beholden to the same illusions as everyone else in this type of reality. But then you have more so another connection to knowledge and information and intuition, and through that, and you begin to incorporate this God knowledge. And I began to along with this God knowledge that was part of my experience, the foundation of, being older and having some background in things and not necessarily being new to all of this information and this spiritual technology. However, one thing that I will say that dawned on me, that beyond a shadow of a doubt, was that this notion of being a starseed, it full bloom came into my mind. I knew, it just intuitively, and I don't know where I picked this word up, this phrase, but it all just sort of intuitively came in, and I began to get books from Patricia Corey, Magenta Pixie, and read these old school people that had, respond, and then of course The Return of the Bird Tribes, Ken Carey, I can't remember his name, but those books, Starseed Transmission, I think I got that book, but anyway, that was something that came full blown in, but along with all that was this understanding of the third dimension, the fifth dimension, and I began to realize that, and I think also synchronistically, I began to find information from other sources that began to help create this more realistic understanding of ascension. And there's still, within that whole spiritual body of spiritual technology in regards to ascension, you kind of have a split between people like David Wilcox and Jay Wiedner, did I get his name right? Anyway, but more people that kind of fall in line with the old school spiritual technology from India, and and the yugas and consciousness, and how all of this creates ascension. And there's that type of understanding where it's all within the consciousness of man. And then you still have people like David Wilcock who are talking about grand solar events and angels and Archangel Michael returning and this kind of magical flash. And I'm kind of in between. I see how they both work together, but it has been beneficial for me to understand ascension in a more realistic sort of way as, expansion of consciousness. And so I believe that when I began making videos, I began to inject that understanding almost immediately, and I began to see people like Ismael Perez, in particular, who I watched many videos with Ismael Perez, who talked about this magical type of ascension that was going to take place, and that everybody in the fifth dimension was going to be, magical, and you would still see your 3D, people involved in that, but you would be this magical popping into their reality, and that perhaps that's just another way of understanding all this. But it was more beneficial for me to ground this knowledge and this understanding of ascension in states of consciousness. And when you see that this dimension, these dimensions, understanding of dimensions, and placing the third dimension within a type of vibratory consciousness, and then the higher dimensions within, expanded states of consciousness, enhanced light quotients, frequency of vibration, and you understand, you can begin to correlate these understandings with your own experiences. For example, when you're engaged in something that is, entertaining to you or engrossing to you, time just becomes not as, much of a factor as if you were engaged in something that was laborious to you or demanding of your consciousness that you didn't necessarily want to be involved in. But you see that when you become ascended and you understand consciousness, and then you're able to stay above those lower vibrations no matter what you're involved in, this domain becomes a sequential progression of linear time that no longer exists, because everything occurs within this now moment of the present. And when you also further begin to understand that the 3D, the lower harmonic universe, is the realm of that duality pervades. That is essentially my definition of 3D, is it is a realm of duality where you're constantly black, everything's black and white, good and bad, and it's being a ping pong back and forth. But this doesn't, no longer play any role within this existence. The concepts of evil, as well as all those lower 3 chakra traits such as fear, anger, anxiety, prejudice, victim consciousness, accumulation of negative karma, revenge, greed, materialism, notion of survivability, this material survivability, that the end of days is here, and you go get all your survival gear and go into a bunker, and that's overwhelms your consciousness, to include competition, jealousy, futile self-indulgence, selfishness, false ego, separatism. All of these types of experiences of lower vibration consciousness do not have a present, are not part of the harmonic universe experience. Now you know that you're transitioning to that higher, you're ascending to those higher realms of consciousness, of vibration, when those types of aforementioned experiences of consciousness no longer have as much of a sway over you, or if they're totally not, if they're non-existent. This is where life progresses based upon the doctrine of a collective or unity consciousness. You begin to be more interested in those things rather than this separatism, this quality of mental separatism that is involved in modern day politics, which is no matter who wins this election tomorrow, everyone's going to lose who's caught up in that paradigm, because it's just going to be contentious. It's just a field of contention, and it has been designed that way. But in the mystical traditions of Judaism, with figures like Melchizedek is this enigmatic king and priest in the Bible. Melchizedek is portrayed as a figure who represents or prefigures Yeshua, Jesus the Christ. And some assert that he is a type of blueprint or the cosmic blueprint of what Jesus came to step into. And this perspective offers a fascinating glimpse into the possible rebirth of highly evolved souls. When you understand souls as the astral container of consciousness, and that these physical bodies are just, they're vehicles, they're organic robot type suits, flesh suits, genetic vehicles. Now this king of Salem, Melchizedek, which means peace, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High, and he blessed Abraham, saying, "Blessed be Abraham by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand." And now, understand this in symbolic terms, but enemies of consciousness. The Bible is highly symbolic. Archangel Metatron, who's also identified with Thoth, Jehuti, of the Emerald Tablets, the scribe of the gods in Egyptian mythology, and as Enoch, who according to biblical accounts walked with God and was taken up to heaven without experiencing death. Now, all of this talk of ascended masters, and it's not just within the Judeo-Christian, it is all over. It is all parts of this globe where these spiritual technologies were known. But ascended masters and the study of their lives highlights the limitless potential of consciousness and the remarkable possibility of transcending the limitations of physical existence. And that is what Ascension is all about. And going back to David Wilcock and Jay Weidner, did I get his name right? I can't remember, but he wrote The Cross of Henday. But these two kind of extremes of understanding of Ascension ultimately result in your consciousness and how you deal with life. And I believe that we are the higher beings, that when your consciousness expands, then we are the ones we've been waiting for. So we, through our awareness and consciousness, will change this reality. We'll bring heaven to earth. I can speak for my own life. I certainly have done so, more so than when all this started. This change started for me back in 2021. And I still have some anger issues. I still do not get along well with organized religion, fundamentalist Christians coming along, trying to beat me over the head to make me follow their script and tell and agree with them that Jesus is God and Lord. And if I don't accept Jesus, I'm going, that shit pisses me off, literally. And it triggers me but see, this is all a gradual progression. I understand that. I have knowledge of that. And I understand that this ascended master, the study of ascended masters, helps me walk with God more so, to elevate my consciousness. But we are the ones, the Christ seed, the God particle exists within us. And we are all potential ascended masters. We are all ascended masters in training. And this highlights the limitless potential of consciousness and the remarkable possibility of transcending the limitations of physical existence. Consciousness. Now leveraging what modern science has found, especially within quantum field theory. Consciousness field theory proposes that heaven is not a physical place, but rather a state of being within the cosmic consciousness field. Our individual units of consciousness, we'll call them psychons, or souls, containers for consciousness, the astral container, freed from the constraints of the genetic vehicle, the physical body, return to this realm of pure consciousness, experiencing eternal bliss and unity with the divine. Now, this narrative presents a compelling, scientifically grounded vision of the afterlife that aligns with many traditional notions of heaven. And I can tell you that my life, the quality of my life, has been more heavenly than from when I was living ignorantly. And my progression, I had I began making videos almost as soon after my Kundalini connection, God Force awakening. And I had one channel on YouTube that got taken away because I was caught up in all the talking about what happened, started in 2020, and, kind of angry. And then also just anger is part of that experience when you kind of see how you've given your power away to many different avenues. But ultimately understanding that I was the source of how the quality of my life, and allowing myself to live within the seven deadly sins of pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, sloth, understanding that these, living within that quality of consciousness, or rather lack thereof, or rather a disposition, these tendencies toward ultra low frequency emotions and behaviors, created this hell, a living hell. And I understood at that time even that hell was fragmentation. And it was being your own worst enemy, allowing yourself to be controlled by, in occult terms, the imp of the perverse. But the soul, if you continue to live and allow those types of low behaviors and that create ultra low frequency emotions, the soul becomes eternally separated from God. And there were people who were in my life that were hell. They were Satanists. They were demonic. That was their reality. Predatory behaviors that impede spiritual and moral maturity and lead to an eternal state of separation from God and heaven. And I was around people like that. And in fact, most of the people that I see, especially people that kind of come along and try to beat me over the head to get me to admit about this external savior formula that they have in their mind, they're living in hell because they don't believe that unless you say this magical formula that Jesus is God, then you're going to hell. But no, that is their crusader, low-level crusader mission that they feel they have to get others involved in to validate themselves in their own lack of consciousness. But heaven signifies a state of ultimate connection, a conscious merging with the divine consciousness field. It is the destination we strive for, the culmination of spiritual growth and self-transcendence. Capitalizing the word heaven, and as the goal, as the significance and the elevated state, capitalizing the word heaven, and then the word hell with a lower h, higher h, capital H heaven, smaller case h hell, fixed, and represents the absence of that connection and an internal state of separation and isolation. And that is what everybody, for the most part, who's involved in politics, who's involved in, attacking other people, that is what has happened. That is the Antichrist, who has conquered the consciousness of most people and separated them, isolated people's consciousness from heaven, this unity, sense of unity. But hell is not a fixed place, but a condition of being, lost in darkness through its own limited consciousness. And keeping it lowercase, hell reflects this lack of definition and the diminished state it symbolizes. Neither heaven nor hell are destinations determined by divine judgment, but rather consequences of an individual's choices and psychonic frequency, your soul vibration. It emphasizes the importance of fostering higher frequency emotions and overcoming the darker aspects of human nature to achieve true spiritual liberation and union with the cosmic consciousness field. So, yes, and I'll leave you with this one bit of a story about how I understood this at an early age through my studies of Zen, and understood through parables, stories like this. I'm just going to get a little sip of coffee here, which at this point is below lukewarm. Yeshua would spew that coffee out of his mouth because it was neither hot nor cold. But anyway, there was a samurai warrior, and the samurai figured out that being successful in their chosen field of combat a lot of times involved control of the mind, the emotions, and such. And so they would go to the masters of that discipline, which were at that time the Zen priest, Zen masters who had lived a life of studying consciousness, lived a life of meditation and such, who were considered the well springs of knowledge of that type of spiritual technology. So the samurai goes, and he wants to understand, though, particularly what the meanings of heaven and hell are, and he finds this Zen priest. And he goes to the Zen priest and says, hey, most honorable Zen priest, I want you to tell me the meanings of heaven and hell. Well, the Zen priest is, he's doing stuff. He's making his tea, his chai latte, and he doesn't answer the samurai. And the samurai thinks, oh, he just must not have heard me. And he goes around and gets kind of in front where he knows the priest can see him. And he asks him again, what is the meaning of heaven and hell? Well, the Zen priest continues on and still ignores him. And at that point, the samurai starts getting really mad. And he says, he yells out again what it is. And this time he pulls out his sword and he has it. And he's like, what? Don't ignore me. And at that moment, the Zen priest stops what he's doing and says, that, sir, noble, honorable samurai, is the meaning of hell. And at that point, a dawn of recognition, a sliver of consciousness, a doorway to heaven opens for this samurai warrior, and he puts his sword back in. And at that moment, the Zen priest looks at him and goes, and that, sir, is the meaning of heaven. May you find the meaning of heaven in these days of tumultuousness, and stay within your own consciousness and realize that your power of ascension is within your hands, or rather your consciousness. Namaste, namaskaram.